Welcome everyone to the second annual Omer Aliyah, a 7-week spiritual boot camp of personal elevation, or simply known as TOA. And happy Yom Ha'atzmaut and 75th anniversary, the State of Israel. This is the third class of our 7-class empowerment series. My name is Nuriel Shor, and in partnership with Hashem, I am the founder of the Omer Aliyah. Welcome to participants from the United States, Canada, Israel, England, Australia, and Uganda, who have joined us on this journey of holy transformation and spiritual evolution. The vision is for all Jews of all backgrounds around the world to be part of a global movement of revealing our individual and collective greatness through Sfirat HaOmer, the counting of the Omer. I want to take a moment to recognize our very generous sponsors. Without their support and partnership, this initiative could not be 100% free for all participants, and simultaneously, it allows this incredible initiative to be sustainable, B'ezrat Hashem, long-term. Also want to take a moment to thank our various community partners for helping to spread the word regarding this initiative to their various communities and networks. And you'll notice that the affiliations span religious denominations, and that's because this initiative is for every Jew around the world, irrespective of background, irrespective of denomination. The Torah is an inheritance for us all. And so if you'd like more information regarding sponsorship or becoming a community partner or connecting me with somebody, please email me at omeraliyah@gmail.com. Second. So the mission of the Omer Aliyah is to serve as a spiritual detox of the klipot, the barriers that are preventing us from accessing Hashem and our highest selves, while simultaneously building a foundation of spiritual power. Practically speaking, the essence of the Omer Aliyah is tikkun lamidot, repairing, refining, and elevating our character attributes based on the lower 7 sfirot, which correspond to these 7 weeks. By emulating these divine attributes, we transform into conduits of peace, love, and blessing for ourselves, for others, and for all of creation. The structure of the boot camp consists of 4 in-person community gatherings in Los Angeles, 7 virtual empowerment classes taught by 7 teachers, and 49 days of individual learning and growth. For more information on the Omer Aliyah, or to start your own local TOA community wherever you are in the world, email me at omeraliyah@gmail.com. We are currently in the week of Tiferet, and we have the zechut of having CHAVA FLORYN. As a workshop facilitator and educator, CHAVA specializes in mindfulness, balance, and channeling expansive thinking. She's also the host of the Nurture Series podcast and the Search web series, which asks thought leaders, what is the meaning of life? CHAVA's articles have been published in the Los Angeles Jewish Journal, Huffington Post, and the New York City Allgemeiner Journal. Her newly released book, Everything's Going to Be Okay, How to Nurture Yourself During a Storm, is a #1 release on Amazon.com and provides help in how to address personal crises. Before we begin, a couple housekeeping remarks. This class is being recorded and will be uploaded to the Omer Aliyah YouTube channel. So please hold all your questions and comments until after the class finishes. I will then stop the recording, after which we will have an opportunity for open and confidential conversation with CHAVA. May Hashem bless our Omer Aliyah and all who are involved, so that Klal Yisrael may discover the greatness within and bring about individual, collective, and global geula speedily in our days. I now hand the class over to you, CHAVA.
Thank you so much, Nuriel, and thank you so much for putting this wonderful program together. Can everybody hear me okay? Okay, great.
Yes.
Yasher koach to you, Nuriel, for putting this beautiful program together. I feel fortunate enough to know you on a personal level, and to participate in such a beautiful program is truly uplifting on so many levels for me. So I thank you very, very much. I want to welcome everybody and say hello to everyone on this beautiful Tuesday night. special Yom Ha'atzmaut evening. This is such a perfect night to be talking about Tiferet as we welcome in this very holy time of recognizing the state of Israel, and all of the struggles that go into being having our beautiful country, especially during this time when things are so difficult and challenging, as they usually are. But Tiferet is that perfect combination of the difficulty, the challenging, the finding discipline, and also the free-flowing love journey of chesed, which is benevolence, and that perfect combination. It's that perfect symmetry, if you will. Tiferet is also a beautiful word that really reminds us of the word beauty, because really what's beautiful is something that is complex in nature. There was once a story of somebody who brought a wise man a picture, and he said, what's the difference, between a picture and a piece of art? A picture is the real thing. Shouldn't that be so much more welcome? Shouldn't that have way more beauty to the eye of the beholder versus somebody who spent hours trying to do the same thing but with his paintbrush? Like, it seems that the picture is the actual replica. It's the actual thing. It's not even a replica. So why is it that that is less expensive or considered less than valuable than a painting? And the answer is because the painting is the expression of the struggle of the person. It's the consistent work that goes into figuring out how all of the dynamic emotions play into the expression of this particular piece. And so, of course, the thing that has the more complexity involved, the more struggle involved, is going to have more value. And that, in a nutshell, is Tiferet. We're going to talk a little bit about a lot of interesting things tonight. To give you an overview, one of the things that I really want to talk about is really Tiferet. Of the three different emotions, Chesed, Gevura, and Tiferet, the first three, Chesed really is a representation of Abraham, its kindness and benevolence. And we know that Abraham was somebody who had a tremendous amount of haknasat orchim. He invited guests into his tent. He was a man who sought after helping others. So he was really a representation of chesed. Whereas Yitzchak, Isaac, was more a representation of gvura, of discipline, of hard work, of a different kind of mannerism that some people would call the word aggressive. I don't really like the word aggression as much as there is strength in it. There's strength to being disciplined. And we know that Isaac spent his entire life building wells, digging for wells. That was his entire life. And that took a certain amount of discipline. There's a lot that goes into digging a well, the grittiness and the dirt and the waking up every morning and doing the same thing every single day. But Tiferet is a representation of Yaakov. And Yaakov has a lot of interesting attributes. But one of the things that Yaakov is known for is he's called an Ish Tam. And we're going to get a little bit into the details of why he's called an Ish Tam and what we can learn from that particular phrasing that gives us real insight into what Tiferet is. By understanding Yaakov's life, we can then understand what Tiferet really is and how we can apply it into our own life. And I'll finish the class with an exercise that we'll all get to do together, where you'll have the opportunity to take the lessons we learned in this class and then use it in a personal exercise. And I hope that you'll stay around for that, because that's kind of the fun part. So the Zohar says, Chesed ihu mayim, Gevura eish, Tiferet avir, which means that Chesed is water, Gevura is fire, and Tiferet is air. And air is the balancing force between water and fire. Water will put fire out. Fire will vaporize water, but both need air in order to live and breathe. And oxygen is what keeps us alive. it gives us rise to both water and fire. So Tiferet on one hand can be restrictive, but it also could be loving and kind on the other hand. It's again, that perfect balance of gvura and chesed, of discipline and benevolence. If I'm going to do a quick screen share, and we're going to take a look at the very first, I created a source sheet for all of you. Just come down here. If you see The Flames of Faith by author Zev Reichman, he says something really beautiful that I really thought we should include in this. He says the combination of chesed and gevura together produces a third emotion, which is tiferet, harmony. And it's much more than just the sum of the two. He says, and he said it so beautifully, which is why I thought I'd read it to you. When generosity sweetens restraint, harmony is the feeling of pleasure that emerges. Harmony emerges from the blend of opposites, kind of like the way we talked about the artist creating this painting. So much of what goes on in a painting is the opposites occurring, right? The dark and the light all kind of emerging into one place. So he compares it to song. I'm a singer myself. And he says, imagine a choir. The high-pitched voices that are difficult to produce might be viewed as gvura, and then the deeper voices would be considered like chesed. And when you merge them together, you get the perfect harmony. It's sugar is sweet, like chesed, and lemon is tart, like gvura. And when you mix those two together, the perfect chef knows how to have that perfect balance. That perfect balance of having the sweet and the salty. And that's what creates something very complex. And it's the balance of those two. And that's really what Tiferet is. If you look at Jacob's life, Jacob led a very complex and polarizing life. On the one hand, he was a man of simplicity, of learning. He was a father. He had tremendous struggle in his life. Just getting married was a feat. First, he ended up going to his uncle Lavan, where he was then tricked into marrying the first wife and then marrying the second wife. And so there was this trickery that was involved in him just even building his family unit. Then he loses his son to, for years thinking he's dead, his son Joseph. His daughter gets raped, his daughter Dinah. There's tremendous amount of strife between him and his brother. His brother Esav tries to murder him. This is not a man who lived a very easygoing life. And he really has all the perseverance and not only the grit that he needs in order to move through these very difficult scenarios. Let's look at the source sheet to see the difference between how the Torah describes Esav versus his brother Yaakov for just a second. We'll open up the here. So it says here, Genesis, Bereshit, Chav He Chav Zayin. When the boys grew up, Esav became a skillful hunter, a man of the outdoors, but Yaakov became a mild man raising a livestock. But Yaakov ish tam Yoshev Ohalim. It says that Yaakov was an ish tam. That's how it describes Yaakov. And so I just thought to myself, what does ish tam mean? Why is the Torah, everything that the Torah writes is specific? And so there could have been so many things that they could have described Yaakov as being. Why ish tam? So if you go down, what does Rashi say that ish tam means? Tam, a plain man. That's what Rashi says. Not an expert in all these things, as his heart was his mouth, his thoughts and his words tallied. One who is not ingenious in deceiving people is called tam, plain, simple, because we know that he wasn't a deceiver. He tried to, but at the same time, we know that he was a deceiver in some ways. He deceived Esav in order to get the birthright. So how is it that the Torah is still describing him as an ish tam? He was very smart. He knew how to manipulate the manipulator. He figured it out. It may not have been what he wanted to do, but he did figure it out, right? It also I think I had added this one Rashi, dwelling in tents, because it also says Yaakov ish tam Yoshev Ohalim. He was a very mild man, raising a very mild man, but he was Yoshev Ohalim. He was sitting in a tent. What tent was he sitting in? This also gives us more context and flavor into understanding who Yaakov was. Why would it describe him as that? And Rashi says dwelling in tents mean he sat in the tent of Shem and Aver. Shem and Aver were the like brilliant philosophers, learned men of the time. They were not Jewish, by the way. Shem and Aver were men who had like the secrets to the world, and they had all the information needed. They had the Torah that they were basically teaching the world at the time, even though the Torah wasn't given. And Yaakov spent his time learning these secrets of the world. There's another place that it talks about the word ish tam, and we're going to go down in our source sheet. I wanted to see, are there other places that it says ish tam? Because I want to understand, what does ish tam mean? Because if we understand what ish tam means, we can really understand Yaakov, and then we can understand Tiferet and how it applies to us. So the Torah says in the Haggadah, it actually talks about the 4 sons. And one of the sons it talks about is the simple son. It says, blessed is the creator who gives the law to his people Israel. Blessed is he who expresses these 4 different sorts of children: the wise, the wicked, the simple, the one not having the capacity to ask. So we see it says ve'echatam. It talks about the simple son. But we know that, again, what does that mean, simple? What does simple actually mean? Because whenever you have a language, a translation from English to Hebrew, or from Hebrew to English, it's always going to be a little bit skewed. And so I always like to go a little bit deeper. Like, really, what does that mean? If we go down to the very next source, you'll see that it says in Baruch Shamar on the Pesach Haggadah, it talks a little bit about what maybe it translates tam to mean. In the Jerusalem Talmud, there's a variant version of the Midrash of the 4 sons, it says in this particular source sheet, which uses the word tipesh, fool, instead of the word tam, simple, to describe the 3rd child. So in this particular interpretation, it's saying that tam is not simple, it's like somebody who's foolish. That's what it's describing tam as. Here it says the word tam doesn't fit here, since it often has a positive connotation in the biblical and rabbinical literature. It can mean pure or whole. So on the one hand, it maybe means foolish, and on the other hand, maybe it means pure or it means whole. So the one son who is wise, the one who is wicked, the one who is very pure, who's very whole. But is he foolish or is he whole? Is he a deceiver? What is he? Again, what is tam? And then it goes on to say, the patriarch Yaakov is referred to as an ish tam. Again, it refers back to that because that's the first time we actually see that phrase. And the word tipesh, on the other hand, has a connotation of someone who has difficulty understanding and one who asks questions, but is limited in their answer. So once again, we're still kind of wondering, what does ish tam mean? The Torah says there's another person that is described in the Torah. There are 2 other people described in the Torah as an ish tam. One is Job, and one is, actually there are 3 other people. One is Job, one is Avimelech, and one is Noach. So let's look at Job and the story of Job, because that gives us a deeper insight into what ish tam means. It says there was a man in the land of Uz whose name was Job, and that man was sincere and upright, God-fearing, and shunning evil. Again, it uses the word v'haya ha'ish hahu tam, and it describes him as being upright, sincere. That's how it uses the word tam. And we know a little bit about the story of Job. I'm going to give you a little background. I did a little bit of Talmud background to find out exactly what was the story of Job. So there's no real clear consensus over who Job was or how he lived his life. There's a few different stories around who Job possibly was. And knowing who Job was also gives us insight into what ish tam could possibly mean. So on the one hand, Job's birth was, at the time, it says, of the Jewish descent into Egypt, and his passing was at the time of Exodus, which would have made his lifespan 210 years. So this opinion kind of seems to be in the harmony with Talmudic teaching as to who Job was. And at the same time, we also learned that Job might have been somebody that had a lot of suffering. And the reason why it says that he had suffering is because he was possibly one of the 3 royal advisors to the Egyptian Pharaoh, who decided to deliberate and plot to murder all the Jewish newborns. And that's why later in life, he had all of his family murdered and everything was taken away. Other people place him at the era of the spies and the judges and the returnees in the Babylonian exile. Some have put him at the era of the Persian King Ahasuerus, the kingdom of Sheba. And there are really so many different interpretations as to who Job was and what era he lived in. But his main story is that he had a life of tragedy. The Midrash says that Job didn't really suffer the tragedies attributed to him, but did live at some point, and that everything that he talked about in his story was all metaphorical. So we don't really know who Job is. The Maimonides writes that regardless of which view that we embrace, the story of Job is the fundamental aspect of the Jewish system of faith. And the reason why Job is so interesting, that he's called a man Tam, an Ish Tam, is because it's possible that what Job really did in his lifetime is he struggled with his relationship with God. And this struggle with his relationship with God is similar to what Jacob did. Jacob had to live in the world of deceit, of constant struggle. And at the same time, he also lived in the house of Shem and Aver, where he was protected by the Torah and by learning and by philosophy and by his own personal satisfaction of becoming growing. So he had to kind of have one foot in one world and one foot in the other world, similar to the way we think of Chesed and Gevura, which is polar opposites. That's why Yaakov was so considered Tiferet, because he was able to bridge both of these gaps together. Another person known as Tam Tzaddik was Noach. And Noach had to do a very similar thing in his life. He had a very difficult task to save an entire world, which he failed at, but he did save himself. And obviously there's a lot of struggle that he has to go through. On the one hand, he loves God because he was saved. On the other hand, he sees what God did and how he destroyed the world. And so there's this struggle of existence that is pursued through Noach's life, and the struggle of spirituality and the struggle of his own inner demons, wanting to be a pure person at the same time living amongst this very awful society. So clearly Tom is giving us an indication. Maybe it's not, doesn't mean foolish, and maybe it doesn't mean simple. Maybe it means something a little bit more complex. Another place we see Tam is used is in the story of Avimelech, and we'll look at the source sheet. I'll just open this up for you. It says here in Bereshis, in the 20th pasuk, Hashem came to Avimelech in a dream by night and said to him, "You're going to die because of the woman that you've taken, for she's a married woman." And Avimelech had not approached her. And he said, "O Lord, see the dictionary under male metaphors for God. Will you slay people even though they're innocent?" He himself said to me, "She's my sister." And of course, this is the story of Abraham and Sarah when they came to visit. And Avimelech really thought that Sarah was Abraham's brother. And so he says, "When I did this, my heart was blameless. My hands were clean." And God said to him in the dream, "I knew that you did this with a blameless heart. And so I kept you from sinning against me. That's why I will not let you touch her." And so it talks about, where does it say that? I'm trying to see in the Hebrew. Ki betam levavcha, because your heart was blameless. In other words, I understood that you had a struggle inside of you. On the one hand, you wanted Sarah for yourself. On the other hand, you held back. And so we know in this story when Abraham and Sarah come to Abimelech was quite attracted to Sarah. So on the one hand, he really wants to take over himself, but he stops himself. And that's why he's not punished. And he talks about him being, his lave is tam. That's how it's described. So does that mean that his lave is simple? No, it means his lave is struggling. And so in the face of all these different interpretations of ish tam, we understand that really tam means a struggle, that there is a serious struggle in one's heart or a serious struggle in one's life that one must overcome. So Tiferet is not just beauty and symmetry, but it's the ability to maintain balance in one's faith in the face of struggle. But it's also the ability to have fear and awe, even when we sense that God is in charge and we are afraid of the fact that things could be not the way we want them to be, we still sense that God understands and sees more than we could possibly understand and see. And it's this beauty, this dichotomy that God exists in, that on the one hand, we have to have faith in what we're going through is beautiful. And on the other hand, we also struggle with knowing that what we might be going through, if it is a difficulty, is catastrophic and very, very difficult. And so there's this this phrase that I love. It's based off of a beautiful movie called, I think it was with Will Smith. And the phrase is, what is it called? I have it written down here and I'm completely blanking. It's called, gosh, I'm blanking on it. Okay, it'll come to me. We'll move on. The idea of light and darkness coexisting is at the cornerstone of Tiferet. That at the one point we can have beauty, we can have joy, and at the same time we can have suffering and we can have pain. And there's a really good story that I'll share with you that I discovered many years ago when my husband's father was very, very sick with cancer. He was dying with a lung cancer. It actually was a colon cancer that had metastasized to his lungs. And on the very last Rosh Hashanah, we had spent the Tishrei with the family. And during Sukkot and the holiday of Simchat Torah, he was very sick and unable to go to synagogue. And the period of time of Sukkot, you are actually commanded, it's the only holiday in all of Jewish history that on Sukkot you are commanded to be joyous. But how can one be joyous when you know that you're spending time with somebody that is not going to live much longer? To say that our family had this big white elephant of doom in the house was an understatement. He was on oxygen 24/7. He was struggling to breathe. We knew that time was of the essence. The doctors had already told us that there wasn't much time left. And at one point, the community came into our home with the Torah and they danced around my father-in-law, and all of his children and grandchildren were dancing around him. And in that moment, for the first time since the holiday season had started, my father-in-law smiled and but a real joy that really emanated from his face. And everybody in the family felt it. And later on, my husband sat with him, with his father, and he said, "Dad, what was going on in your mind in that moment? We know that you're at the end of your life. And yes, you're with your grandchildren, but why the smile? What were you thinking?" And he said, "There's something satisfying about knowing that I see my future. I can see my children and my grandchildren, and I can see that my life had purpose and that everything that I'm leaving to you is going to continue." And it's the first time that my husband understood there could be true joy and true beauty, even in the darkest hour. And those two things can absolutely coexist. Tiferet is really not living in fear. It is really chasing truth. It's chasing your truth. Reb Avraham of Sodolko, the grandson of the Besht, explains, the grandson of the Baal Shem Tov, he explains, Tiferet is when you think about some greatness of God and you join yourself in the quality of glory, that is the source of all bragging. So Tiferet is really about being within the glory. It's like shining inside the light. It's the ultimate collateral beauty, which is the name of the movie. Now I'm remembering it. It's the ultimate collateral beauty that occurs even in the midst of the struggle. And that is why Yaakov was called Ish Tam, because Ish Tam is the man who's able to sit in the struggle and still have faith and not lose himself in all of it. So then the question then becomes, okay, well, this is beautiful, but why does God have to create an obstacle in our path at all? Like, why does it have to work like that? Why does he have to make it so difficult for us to see his closeness? Like, why does there have to be struggle in order for you to notice him? Can't we just notice him without there being like a pain or a struggle or a death or a loss or a financial burden? Like, why is it in those moments that we go, oh, God exists? Like, why can't we notice it on the good stuff, you know? And Rabbi Ephraim tries to provide an answer to the question. And he says, quote, because of the divine aspect in the desires and thoughts that come to you, that is the holy sparks that fell from their source and yearn to be repaired and raised to their source. And thus they push themselves into your prayer and service, end quote. In other words, what he's saying is that everything in this world is a tikkun. Everything that happens in this world is about repairing. And everything we're doing right now between Shavuot, between Passover and Shavuot, is about repairing. We're repairing ourselves, we're transcending ourselves, we're healing ourselves, and real healing can't take place unless something's kind of broken. And so as we look at ourselves and we start to notice maybe our struggles, and we're all very lucky that God gives us our struggles. And we are very lucky, as my husband says, we don't have to go through these hard things. We get to go through these hard things, right? So the question I'm asking all of you tonight is really, what is your struggle that you might be going through today? And what is the sort of silver lining, if you will, that you may have garnered from the struggle? Because that's really what Yaakov was able to do, and why he was really the father of our nation, and why he managed to build all 12 tribes is because he had this innate ability of leaning into the most difficult place and at the same time holding on to his faith with dear life. Chesed and Gevura is often called Rachamim, which means mercy. And mercy is when you have complete power over another. To judge and to punish is Gevura, but instead you lean into the polar opposite, which is Chesed. And on a related note, Rechem also means womb. And womb, the place that something is born in, where something is conceived, where there is birth, there is always this balance of mercy coming forth. So when we think we're at a place in our life that it just can't get any worse, always know Hashem has mercy to birth new thoughts, new possibilities, new inspiration. And that is really leaning into that is the Tiferet movement. That's the Tiferet mindset. We're going to open up the screen one more time and just read this last thing, which I think is really, really beautiful over here. I missed one small thing about Yaakov. So interestingly, I'll say one last thing about this. So Yaakov was, if you go up here, it talks a little bit about when Yaakov was left alone, right before he ended up having his, confrontation with Esav. Yaakov, it says that he had a struggle with the divine agent, And this divine agent, it says he wrenched Yaakov's hip at its socket. So the socket of his hip was strained as he wrestled with him. And then he said, let me go, the dawn is breaking. And at that point, he named him Yisroel. And he said, Yisroel, I will name you because of the struggle that you have, because it means, Yisroel means God of struggle, meaning like he has faith and he still sought it through. And I always ask this question, why is it that in this struggle that Yaakov had with this angel, that he would hurt his sinew, his hip bone? What was it about that particular part of the body? And if you think about that particular part of the body, that injury really forced him to limp his whole life. And as a result, he always remembered the struggle that he had. And when you think about it, if that is not working, that particular part of the body, it's the actual part of the body that allows you to step one foot in front of the other. So if you're unable to walk, if you have pain walking, it's usually because of that particular injury, that particular sinew that goes into the hip bone. And if you think about it, Yaakov always remembered the struggle because he had this limp for the rest of his life, but he still walked. He still got up on his 2 feet and he still kept going. And he still put one foot in front of another. And I talk a little bit about this in my book. One of the stories that I told in my book was about my grandfather. He was he was in this very elite unit during World War II. He was a lieutenant corporal in the United States Army. And there is a quote of one of his unit officers. They were part of a unit called the Merrill's Marauders. And the Merrill's Marauders were a group who were entrenched in the Burmese mountains. They had to face some of the most difficult terrain while the Japanese were shooting on them, while they were faced with disease and starvation and a million other very difficult tasks. Almost the entire unit died out. Those who did survive did not live past 40. My grandfather was 42 when he died. And there was a very famous accounting. There was a book written by only one of the Merrill's Marauders. His name was Charles Ogden Jr. And he said every single day, the hardest thing to get through was knowing that you didn't know what was coming around the bend. You didn't know whether you were going to make it or not. And he said, the only thing that got me through it is I knew I had to just put one foot in front of the other. I had to just keep moving. So when you think of Tiferet and you think of Yaakov, he continued to put one foot in front of the other. Sure, it was painful, but it was also possible, even through the struggle. And so I think that's really what I take away from Tiferet, and why we see like so many artists and writers and musicians. We think of an artist as a tortured soul. We hear of all these stories of artists who are like going through all different kinds of very difficult things, because emotions are, they're like they're the piano tunes of the soul, right? They're the different keys that keep us moving. And a lot of times when we have so many of them playing all at once, and as an artist, I can vouch for this, it can feel like extremely overwhelming. So you have to organize it some way. And the way that we organize it is by writing songs or creating art or making cinema or figuring out ways to organize it so that we can express ourselves better. And so to me, when you think of Tiferet, you think of artistry, you think of that perfect balance and of that ability to really lean into our struggles, but in a creative sort of way. So we're going to get creative tonight. Is everyone ready? Awesome. Okay, this is the fun part. All right, I'm going to open a screen share here. So tonight we have, can everybody see this? Okay. So tonight I created a little exercise for you, and there are 6 prompts. So we get to go through all of them together. The first prompt being, everybody write down, if you can, with a pencil. If you have your computers open and you want to type, that's okay too. I like using a pencil because part of the creative expression, and this happens to me when I'm in creative mode. I'm a singer, songwriter, I'm a producer, and I create film and I write. And so for me, anytime I'm trying to like really get into the nitty gritty of, okay, what is it that I want to express and how do I want to express it? I always use a number 2 pencil, because when I'm writing, the activity of actually using your hand gives you the opportunity to have more thoughts come to paper. There's something that happens with your body that can create more creative flow. So I recommend it, but if you don't have it, that's okay too. So we're going to write one struggle that you have had in the past. And I'll give you a few seconds to just write that down. And as you write down what that struggle is, if you want to write this for yourself, write it for yourself and you don't have to share. But if it's something that you want to share, know this is being recorded. So I invite you to do this exercise as a way of kind of experiencing it, not so much, airing out all of your personal things, just because I want to be sensitive about the fact that this is a very public platform. So if you do share, share something that you're comfortable with the whole world knowing what it is. And don't feel the need to have to share your most deepest, secrets. But this is like a process I thought I would take you through. It's what I go through when I'm designing something new or writing a new script or writing a new song. This is my process. So I wanted to take you through that. Anybody want to share, just for the sake of having some conversation? One struggle that you may have gone through, and don't chime in all at once.
Well, if nobody else is going to share, then I'll just say something that I'm sure we can all relate to, which is essentially not being mindful in our eating practices.
Okay, good. Okay, so a struggle you might have is just kind of eating whatever you want, not being conscious about the way that you're eating. Yes?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Let's go back to the exercise. Okay, so Nuriel says one struggle he's had in the past is not being able to be mindful about his eating patterns. What is one way God's glory shined through in this struggle? So something that may have happened as a result that was positive as a result of going through the struggle. Something that happened that God shined a light.
Well, I would say that on almost like a pragmatic level, knowing that on Shabbat, we are given permission to essentially really bask in oneg, right? In that sense of pleasure in every sense of the word, including what we eat and how much we eat. And so knowing that, learning about that a long time ago, I knew that, okay, I'm going to reserve all of my spectacular eating specifically for Shabbat. And then all the other days of the week, I'm going to implement Gvura. I'm going to restrain myself, knowing that there's one day of the week that is special when it comes to eating.
Right. Okay, now write one truth you learned in that struggle. A truth about yourself that you learned from going through that. And feel free, if anybody has would like to share, just come on and chime on in. You don't have to raise your hand or anything. And again, anytime you want to write a poem or you want to write a song or you want to write a script or whatever it is that you're doing as an artist, maybe you're painting something, this is a great exercise to do beforehand. And I would say that this is also part of really your self-discovering, your own Tiferet self-discovery. All right. And the next question was, what is one lesson I've learned from the experience? So first, you're writing the truth of what it is that struggle is. So it could be the truth that struggle was, well, the truth is that I realized that I don't eat enough during the week and I need to become more mindful of my eating on Monday through Friday. Or maybe it's the truth that I learned in that struggle is I'm using food in order to avoid feeling frustrated about A, B, or C. So whatever it is that that truth is, And then the lesson you learned from that experience. So the takeaway from this is I need to become more mindful of my emotional state. And I need to realize that I can heal feeling frustrated over A, B, or C, right? Number 5 is, what is one beautiful visual I can link to the struggle? And Noriel, I'll just ask you that. What's one beautiful visual that you can link to this particular struggle? Give me any visual you want. It doesn't even have to make sense, but it can make sense to you.
CHAVA is popping into my mind.
Challah. Okay. So your beautiful visual is challah. And for the sake of having a really interesting time, now I'm going to ask you to do the hard part, which is write a poem about this entire experience. So now you've discovered the past, the present, the struggle, the beauty, God's glory, the lesson, the visual. Now write the poem.
I think we're gonna need a few more seconds in this class.
No, take your time, give it a few seconds, take your time. So I did this exercise with my class last year when I taught this class. And I have to say, every single person who wrote their poem, they always prefaced the introduction before they read their poem out loud with by the way, my poem sucks. To which I would say, okay, well, let's just listen. And everyone's poem was epic. I just have to tell you. So don't judge yourself in it, really go through the process. And there is a method to this madness, because if you think about it, Tiferet is the ability to forge through life using God's glory, God's light, and your struggle, and to create this beautiful symmetry, this like unusual complex symmetry, this collateral beauty. And that's kind of what I hoped we could accomplish tonight as a group. If anybody wants to write their poem, I'll be quiet for a few seconds or a few minutes, and please chime in with it when you're ready.
All right, so with the 1 minute that I had to think of something.
Go for it, Noriel.
Eating the divine reveals my power to relate and to conquer holy time. That's it.
It's beautiful. I love it. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. I love that. And the complexity of the way that you wrote it, you took a very kind of, I would say, kind of a not very complex struggle, and you made it that much more interesting by, giving us the visual. And I think that that's really the essence of Tiferet. Anybody else have anything to share? I see some writing going on in that corner. Is that Chaya and her husband? Did you guys write anything over there? Just
Wait there. I had a struggle with like a couple of workers who always try to push your buttons, and then I said that God creates us in His image, and that we can't change them, but we can only change ourselves. And then I used the phrase that we should be joyous, but not only in our Sukkot, but we should be joyous that we're alive, and that that we should enjoy each day, and we can control ourselves. We have to change ourselves, not even though it's how we react to the person.
Yeah, that it's we have control over our reactions.
Mm-hmm. So it's, I guess,
unless you're married.
Yeah, then we can.
Then we're in charge of his reaction, huh?
That's right, Chaya. That's right. Thank you for sharing. Did you guys write a poem? Was that your poem?
Well, that was sort of my,
That was Gary's poem.
That was
Yeah.
Gary's poem. Thank you, Gary. That was great. I loved it. Cheryl is writing over there. I can see her. You have anything to share, Cheryl?
oh yeah, so one thing I said this once at lunch. I said that the rabbi told me when I got married, it says, if you give a little, you fall in love a little. If you give a lot, you'll fall in love a lot. And that we're like flowers, you have to check to see what the flower will become. You know, like in your wife, you don't look at her when you first get married, it's what she will become.
Oh, I like that. Okay, where's my husband? He needs to come on this board.
Yeah. Write
That's
it down.
Write it down. Good thing we're recording.
Yeah.
Cheryl, you have anything to share with us? You're writing very seriously over there.
I need a couple of more minutes.
Okay, while Cheryl is writing, I'm going to share something I wrote actually in my book. This is my book, everybody. 1 second, I have a thing. 1 second, if I can get it on. There it is. Okay. So I wrote on the very first page something that I thought really fits tonight, and I'll read it to you guys, okay? There is a stained glass window in my kitchen that catches the light of the first rays of sun each morning. Round jewel-toned glass panels scatter a kaleidoscope of patterns, the colors singing of the Art Deco past while simultaneously capturing my present. My eyes glide down to the bottom corner of one window pane where I catch a glimpse of a fracture. Sharp edges are suspended in crystal. The bones are there, but the soul is gone. As the light catches the sharper fractals, a stronger warmth bathes my body. The resolute broken fractals hang on, clutching the sill like prey on a web, begging to stay whole. Like the disruption that sets in during a crisis, it's no longer perfect, but it has its own structure now. Isn't that the brutality of chaos, the imperfect ruffling of our lives, and the determined reset that comes after? So to me, that's really what Tiferet is, right? The ability to forge this beautiful, complex union between hope and faith, between loss and hopelessness, between frustration and joy, between glory and fear, and this dance that we do with life in every single struggle that we encounter. Anybody else have anything to share on their poems?
I'm almost there.
All right, Cheryl.
As Cheryl's is wrapping her poem up, I feel compelled to share that you know, the Omer Aliyah was born in the darkness of COVID. And so, Chava, when you were talking about how Tiferet is this space that is able to have darkness and light coexist, and where Rachamim is born from this place, it really took me back to the seed of this initiative, because had COVID not forced us to be at home and to essentially focus and prioritize and essentially have 2 years of a giant hit Bodhidut session, right? I probably would not have had the level of focus and intention and just kavanah in general to dedicate my time and energy towards the Dance of the Omer book, and to have the results that I did, which then led to this. So for me, Tiferet really does have it rings true for me, because again, like you can see how much light can be born out of such darkness.
Yes, yes. And a lot of times that's kind of, I mean, truthfully, that really is, that's like the best kind of plug, if you will, for the book that I just wrote, because that's really what I wrote about, was that on the one hand, there was this darkness in the world that took over, and our family had experienced our own particular darkness. My husband got extremely sick during that period of time and almost lost his life. Thank God he is doing well now, but it was very touch and go. And you start to, we were lucky in that we were able to take the time to really reconfigure our lives in ways that we needed, but didn't know we needed, you know? I'm going to actually, for anybody who's here, I'm going to give you guys the link. If anybody wants to purchase the book, you have it in your chat there.
Thank you, CHAVA. And I think to be respectful of everybody's time, you know, this was actually a little bit of a different structure than previous classes in terms of everything is still being recorded. But we'll have Cheryl kind of have the final remarks, and then we'll officially conclude everything. And anybody that wants to hang back for a couple of minutes can do so.
Cheryl, you are up. We are waiting with bated breath for this beautiful poem. And you're not allowed to say it's bad as an intro.
Okay, it's a poem entitled "The Challenge."
Great.
It came upon me like a flash without giving me time to think. I knew the things I had to do and couldn't let myself think. So I went into auto mode where distractions were none. And suddenly, what do you know? Everything had gotten done.
Thank you. That was beautiful. That was beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that. And you know, I just want to thank everybody for being here. And again, Nouriel, for putting this beautiful evening together. May we all really find the collateral beauty in our lives. May we all continue to see the light and the silver lining, even amongst the thorns and the struggle. May none of us have struggle, but if we do, may we all have the ability to come out on the other end better, brighter, maybe a little cuter, possibly skinnier. I don't know.
Amen. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. CHAVA, thank you so much for everything that you poured into this class. Those sources were incredible, and just the multiple chapters of your presentation on Tiferet and this interactive exercise. It's so appreciated.
Thank you.
And thank you everybody who's on here live for carving out the time this evening to direct your energies and intention and attention towards learning about Tiferet. And B'ezrat Hashem, we will see you all next week for our Netzach class. So again, have a wonderful week, everybody. A wonderful week of Tiferet. Happy Yom Ha'atzmaut.
Happy Yom Ha'atzmaut.
And only Simcha.
Only Simcha. Thank you. Thank you so much, Nouriel.
Thank you very much.
Can't hear you.
Okay, also I want